On this discussion, we get to hear from Mehak, a Pakistani candidate who broke into Bain. She shares her networking strategy, her approach to case prep, and advice for aspiring consultants. Oh, and she'll also share her hidden talent. It's a fun conversation that anyone aspiring to go into consulting won't want to miss. Let's get into it. Hey folks, welcome to another Strategy Simplified discussion. We are delighted to have with us Mehak from Dubai, or actually she's in Pakistan, but she'll be working in Dubai for Bain. And so, Mehak, welcome. We're excited to have you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here today. I just feel that this is possibly the biggest validation for me as far as consulting goes, more so than any of my offer letters, because I've always watched, I've heard and a lot of interviews and podcasts on your channel, and it was very aspirational to one day be here and sharing this platform with you. So super excited. Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, thank you for your kind words. We're excited. So let's just get right into it. Can you just talk about who you are and just share a brief overview of your background, please?
For sure. So I'm Pakistani Canadian, but I was born, bred, raised in Karachi, Pakistan. I'm the eldest of three siblings. And right after high school, I went to Canada in McGill University to pursue my undergraduate studies as an arts major at McGill. And then I moved into a very brief stint as a consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers Calgary. Post that, I moved to American Express, where I did in-house strategy in Toronto and New York, and then moved back to Pakistan to do volunteer work for a brief period of time, and then joined a conglomerate called Engro Corporation, which is the country's largest conglomerate. Did in-house strategy there, actually, and then moved on to getting promoted to the office of the president and CEO. And after about 5.5 years of work experience, moved on to INSEAD to do my MBA. I just graduated in December and hoping to join Bain on March 21st of this year.
Okay, well, congrats on the Bain offer, and you've quite the storied career. Yeah, and so from an arts major, that's not your combination of education and background is not one we often hear about as far as breaking into consulting. Can you share a little bit about that journey? How did you, decide that consulting was right for you, given your background?
So great question, Japheth. Actually, there are three reasons why in a very top-down fashion. The first is that I actually had exposure to consulting through my brief stint at Pricewaterhouse. So that was the inroad, and not particularly strategy, but more implementation. So that's the first thing. The second thing that compelled me to join consulting is that during my time at Engro, I actually represented part of the client team that was working with Bain and McKinsey. And so it seemed like consultants on the floor literally did God's work. And that seemed very exciting. Yes. I'm just flattering my new career choice. And the third thing is that, look, I've always believed in challenging myself. And coming from Southeast Asian families, there are two types of jobs for art students that were acceptable. Either it's investment banking / consulting or engineering. And it was progressively a lot easier to transition from arts into consulting versus engineering. So those are, in all honesty, the three reasons why I thought that consulting is the right choice for me. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I did my MBA, to bring this discussion to a full circle, because coming from a non-traditional, both academic as well as professional services background, I felt that I needed to get that MBA to help make my profile that much more credible for consulting. And that's why I actually selected INSEAD, because it is one of the target schools which churns out a significant number of consultants going into MBB and other firms. So I think it just made more sense for me to make my profile stand out, and therefore I did consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And just before we dive into your process of preparing and landing the job at Bain, can you share a little bit about, do you have one piece of advice for international students recruiting for consulting? Somebody maybe with a similar background as yours, do you have one piece of advice you'd tell them, just something that was helpful for you along your journey?
Sure. So One piece of advice that I would give is that and this comes actually from the context of hearing a lot of my peers and other people around me who've reached out saying that they can't get in or it's too daunting to apply. And my advice would be that, people who think they can't do it and people who don't do it are both equally right. So in a nutshell, non-traditional backgrounds actually are very welcomed in consulting firms, is what I've discovered through various conversations. And the one thing that people shortchange and underestimate from any background really is this whole process of networking. It's very intimidating to write to someone on LinkedIn Messenger or email someone and ask for their time. But you know what? I felt that the most valuable inputs that I've gotten as far as my prep is concerned is by literally firing off cold emails and talking to consultants who are in the business in my target office, which was Dubai, and learning what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, how they prepared, and what are some of the pitfalls they see while interviewing candidates. And I would suggest to everybody applying that have those conversations. It's super uncomfortable, but you know what? It's less uncomfortable than any case interview you're going to do. So might as well practice early on out. And it really, really bared a lot of fruits for me, even though I was coming from a target school.
Yes. Boom. Well, I love that. And there's a lot there, but I love your response there. Those who think they can and those that think they can't are both right. Absolutely. Can we just dig a little bit deeper into what you just shared about those hard, networking conversations, those cold reach out emails? What did you do there? Can you share a little bit more of your LinkedIn process for finding the right people to reach out to? Did you reach out on LinkedIn or email? And then, go a little bit deeper into the kinds of questions you asked when you did get a chance to talk to those folks.
Great question. And I'm going to try my level best to sound very much less of a creep and a stalker when I give this response, although it might be hard. But effectively, so you have a three-part question, right? First is the whole stigma around networking before we get into how I actually approached it. You have to be very clear as a person what you're hoping to get out of a conversation. And you also want to make it worthwhile for the person talking to you, because people in the business are exceptionally busy. And so they're likely going to talk to you either on their way to the airport or on a weekend, maybe, if you're lucky. And so it's generally, in my experience, a 15-minute conversation. And so for me, there was literally a three-part process, which was A, what am I hoping to achieve from it? B, what is the best way to achieve it? So through a LinkedIn message or an email. And C, what is my follow-up strategy going to be like? For the first part of the process, I had a list of 3 questions to answer your question as well, Japheth, is firstly, learning about the firm. So just very direct questions on what they do, what the firm is doing right now in terms of sectors, in terms of, getting people on board, in terms of training. So just general know-how of the firm and its culture. Secondly, give them a little bit background about where I'm at in terms of my preparation process, what I'm hoping to achieve in terms of my career aspirations in the next 3 to 5 years, which is generally the horizon that most people want to go into consulting for about 3 years. And the third thing that I was very big on is just asking for a piece of advice or a question that will help me or anyone distinguish themselves. So generally a question I ask is, what's one book that you'd recommend that I read? Or what's one news article that you've read that I could read and learn from? Something like that. Mm-hmm. I think in my experience, just asking that unorthodox question, because it really helps you stick out. And because they're having so many conversations a person in general, it's a bit difficult to remember who they spoke to. And really the end goal, if I had to put it very candidly, is for that person to give you a referral. At the end of the day, I think that's the big thing without directly asking for it. Or secondly, if you're coming from a target school where referral doesn't really matter, you're getting some sort of advice or input that's going to help help you along the journey. So in reality, in summary, the ROI of that 15-minute conversation for you is infinite as a person who's asking the questions. And for the person, giving their responses, it's, from what they tell me, it's their way of kind of giving back to the firm where they're working. And most people are very proud of where they come from, and they do really want to give back to their firm and contribute in the recruitment process. So that's generally how I approach the conversation. To your question around LinkedIn versus email, to be very frank with you, I learned this a bit the hard way. Mm-hmm. So I would send very generic LinkedIn messages that were super direct, and I realized I was getting no responses. And I'm like, this is really frustrating and strange. And I started this networking process about 6 odd months before the actual application journey. So I did give myself some buffer, but then I actually switched my medium, kept the content the same as the message, and just changed it to email. And how I found those emails was like, I knew what the last, like at Bain.com or at McKinsey, whatever, I knew the generic form, and I would take the first and the last name on LinkedIn and just reach out. The third layer is who I would reach out to. So generally, I would find people in my first degree connection, so from INSEAD, who are alums, because I felt that they were more inclined to help me. And we had a mutual connection circuit, which was our school. Another way to do it, if you're not coming from an MBA program, but applying straight from industry or from an grad school, and you don't want to go down that route, is just finding mutual connections first. So those people are more likely to respond to you, and then taking the tree on from there. I've heard from somebody in my program that they found engagement managers and above to reach out to. That's an equally valid strategy. I reached out to a random assortment of people from associates to partners, and I felt that mix was particularly useful for me because it gave me a very diverse perspective of the various types of jobs that people at different layers of an organization do.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, that is absolute gold there. And I advise anybody listening to this to take heed and to take notes and to follow what Mehak is sharing, because it's absolutely valuable and it's absolutely an essential part of the process. Even if networking is not something you enjoy, it's not something you feel like you're good at, it is part of the process for breaking into consulting. And so you received offers from a couple of firms. Can you share, what those firms were, and then just your decision-making process of how did you decide that Bain was right for you?
Sure. Well, a little bit more than a couple. Please don't understate that number, because every offer letter was printed and framed. I kid you not. But no, so actually I picked Bain because of a few fundamental reasons. The first is that I actually worked with Bain as a client at Engro while I was in Karachi. So I was very familiar with their strategy on working with clients, which was co-creation, a lot of collaboration, a lot of touch base, and a lot of respect for the people on an engagement team. I remember being in a board meeting where everyone in the Bain engagement team spoke. So from the associate to the partner, everyone kind of had a chance to speak and present their work. And I found that incredibly empowering as a young person in an organization that can be very daunting to present in a board meeting of people that are all in gray suits and above the age of 60. So that was kind of fascinating. The second thing is that at INSEAD, actually, I got the Bain Fellowship, which was a program that they were running for women. And there I got the opportunity to get mentored by a Bain associate partner in Dubai. And I found that experience to be completely life-changing, because the kind of advice she gave me through my journey, and we actually never did a mock caves, but it was just, almost on a monthly basis, we were touching base. She would ask about my prep, and in a lot of ways, she really curated that application journey for me through her very, very direct and candid advice. And so for me, that was a great opportunity to see that the firm really valued its people, and the culture seemed to be very conducive to new and young people. And the third reason, which is the final reason for selecting Bain, was that through my time at INSEAD, actually, I got exposure to private equity. And I know that Bain specializes in that globally. and they recently developed their practice in the Dubai office. And that work really excited me as well. So it was really a combination of these three things that made me select Bain, with all due respect to the other firms.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. And so you had a bunch of offers on the table, but you decided, hey, I like Bain the best. This is the best fit for me. And then now taking a little step backwards to your interview and your case prep process for these firms in general. Can you share just how did you structure your prep? How did you structure your prep? Did you have a strategy going in? What was that process like for you? We'll be right back after this quick break. Do you want to break into McKinsey, Bain, or BCG? Then join Black Belt. Black Belt is a structured case prep program that combines expert help with self-paced prep curriculum. You get 8 one-hour, one-on-one case coaching sessions with a former MBB coach. You also get access to unlimited digital prep materials, and homework will assign you in between sessions to accelerate your progress. Oh, and by the way, 60% of Black Belts who complete the program land an offer at a top 10 firm. So, if you're serious about landing an MBB offer and changing your whole career trajectory, join Black Belt today. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
Yes, so great question. The short answer to your first question is, did I have a strategy? No. Do I like to believe that I had a strategy? Yes. Did I tell everyone that I had a plan? Yes. So the reality is that we all think that we're going to dive into the world of case prep with knowing how to go about it. I took lots of advice from people that were in my program who had gotten a summer internship. I hadn't applied as a summer intern to any of the firms. So my chance really of applying was in the fall on campus recruitment. And so, I thought that I had absorbed the lessons of everyone who had been through summer recruitment in my MBA program. And the reality is I followed none of it, as much as I like to believe that I did. And so to now reflect on what would have been a great strategy to do, I think, because I did follow it eventually when push came to shove, is literally a 3-part process. The first is go through, and to anyone who's coming in, my advice would be go through free content available through 3 sources that particularly helped me. The first one was there are YouTube videos on, managementconsultant.com, which are doing a live case. That'll give you the exposure on what a case actually looks and feels like. And I would highly recommend all the YouTube material on that because that was very helpful to me. The second thing is that Victor Cheng has some content on YouTube, which gives you a good feeler of how to structure your thoughts. I felt that his approach in terms of framework was a bit more basic, but it really helps you get an intro into how to structure and plan your thoughts. And the third is this great community called Prep Lounge, which I benefited tremendously from because there's a lot of coaches out there who are ex-consultants or current consultants that are posting answers to questions that candidates like myself have on a very regular basis. Furthermore, there's an entire host of people that are looking for case practicing partners. So a great platform to really cut your teeth and learn about consulting in general. So that's the first layer. That's kind of someone doing their recce. I would suggest that in terms of actually reading stuff like frameworks, and some books that are available. I mean, those resources vary from person to person. It shouldn't take someone longer than 1 to 2 weeks to actually absorb all of that because prep comes when you're actually practicing. At least that's what I learned through my experience. And so the second part of really my preparation journey was doing case prep with people. Now, there are 2 facets to this. One is starting case prep with somebody who's at your level or slightly above you. And you can do cases 1 to maybe 10 or 1 to 7 with them to kind of see where you're at. And I would suggest after that, do it with consultants who are in the business or people that are doing strategy work, because that's when you'll notice after that your preparation and your confidence levels will really take a massive jump. And so that feedback is really invaluable. So I would suggest that once you've done some cases with somebody or with various people who are at your level, take it to the next notch, do it with people in the business. And a big part of case prep that really helped me is making some sort of a document. I used Excel of tracking the feedback and the type of case that you're doing and keeping it super simple. And I think that you can't improve something that you can't measure, right? Mm-hmm. So keeping track of all the feedback through an Excel document and revisiting that time and time again to see how your own journey is progressing is exceptionally important. And the third thing I would suggest during this entire journey is if you feel, and this is generally because I really experienced a lot of insecurity and, doubts about my performance. I felt that feedback was getting a bit inconsistent because everyone has a different style of approaching a case, is getting some sort of a coach if you can afford it. Generally, coaches aren't significantly expensive, and spending a couple hours with someone who's actually doing this or has done this day in and day out. I know in my personal experience, I reached out to somebody on Prep Launch called Francesco Riepi, and he was extremely helpful in just kind of helping me revisit some of my ideologies on how I approach cases. So this is not a compulsory by any standard of the imagination, but I know that it helped me really fine-tune my casing skills, which became invaluable for my final rounds, not so much for my first rounds, because that's the distinguishing factor, right? Because at that point, it's fairly binary. So these are literally the three things that I would suggest to anybody doing case prep. Just a caveat over here, though, that there is no such thing as X number of cases ensures success. There's absolutely no rule. For me personally, the sweet spot of great performance came after the 30th case, but I know a lot of people around me that did equally well, having done 10 cases. And then there were some people who did north of 40 cases and did really well. So there's no real magic number. Whenever you feel ready is when you feel ready. That's, famous last words on this topic.
Mehak, thank you. This is absolute gold. And once again, I hope that people listening are taking notes, because you just shared a lot of wisdom, a lot of really good advice for approaching the consulting interview prep process, which is a daunting beast to tackle. And so we'll include some links to some of the resources that you mentioned below. But thanks again for sharing. And now, can you put yourself in the mind of somebody who's just about to start their case prep? And can you share just one piece of advice that you wish somebody would have given you when you were at that stage?
Don't get married to this notion of air quotes called frameworks. There is no such thing. I feel that is something that I struggled with immensely. There are ways of organizing thoughts, but don't get attached and linked and married to predetermined frameworks, because the reality is every interviewer out there knows what's in Case in Point, knows what's in Victor Cheng and all the other resources online, because they've met hundreds and thousands of people over the years. So learn to be a little bit more flexible. And that's kind of what happened to me, is after a certain point, I started really attaching myself to certain things that I'd read online. But the reality is that just shows rigidity and lack of creativity, and don't get stuck in that web of following the same approach like everyone else. I know that's a bit abstract, but I felt that, in my prep, one of the biggest mistakes I made was memorizing frameworks on the get-go and then trying to apply it and retrofit every case into a framework, or vice versa. And I was getting the feedback that I sound very robotic, and it just was not working out for me. So the minute I let myself free and divorced myself from this notion, I saw a massive improvement in my performance.
That's brilliant. And that's one thing we see, time and time again of candidates just trying to memorize frameworks, and then they just sound like a robot. So curious, what are you most looking forward to at Bain? I know you're starting there very soon, and so I know there must be some nerves and some things you're feeling about that, but just curious what you're looking forward to.
So I'm really looking forward to working with the people there, simply because I met quite a few through my fellowship journey. And they seem like such incredibly accomplished individuals. So looking forward to learning from them, really, because that's the only thing I think that justifies the hours that we put in, right? Is that our learning curve is ever so steep and never plateaus. And that's what excites me.
Well, we're excited for you. And now I'd love to transition to this last part of the interview where we asked you a couple of personal questions. And so can you just put yourself in younger Mehak's shoes? Let's say you're about 18 years old. What's one piece of advice you'd give to her, looking back?
Don't be afraid to go off the beaten path. I think I made certain life choices at that age that very much fell into the mold of what was societally appropriate and what seemed, quote unquote, like the right thing to do. And looking back about 10 years of my life, I think I could have taken bigger and bolder risks. I think that's something that I would tell myself to do.
So going off of that, what's one risk you would have taken if you would have known that earlier?
Possibly pursued fine arts. Instead of doing an economics degree in an arts program and not forced myself to do finance later on in life. I think I really enjoyed art, and that's something that I had to abandon at a younger age, which was completely self-inflicted. And because I thought that, an artist is always going to starve. But I feel like that's something that would have been nice to pursue something different and learn from that. So I would say that that's something that it's definite regret for me. Not regret is a bit of a strong word, but that's something that I would have liked to do as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that. And then last question is, I know you must have a hidden talent. Everybody does, but would love to know about yours.
So I really think that I'm a great bathroom singer. I think so. I mean, it's my opinion. That's
Amazing.
why it's a hidden talent. But I feel like one day my talent would be revealed to the world, I hope, but that's something that I think that I have somewhere deep down inside me.
Absolutely. They just don't know. They don't know.
They just don't know. The world just is not ready for it, Jay.
They're not ready.
That's the thing.
Okay. Well, you'll have to send us your album when it comes out. Your bathroom singing collection.
You'll see me at the Grammys at some point, and then
Great.
we'll see.
All right. Then I can say, I know her. Very exciting.
This has been such a fun conversation, Japheth. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having it. And thanks again for coming on and sharing your story. And
It's my pleasure. Anything I can do to give back to you and your team and to the wider community, more than happy to do that. You guys have been an incredible source of inspiration and help. You and your team at various junctures of this journey. And I wish you guys and the company all the very best, because it's truly been life-changing for me. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Strategy Simplified. If you enjoyed this discussion with Mehak, we'd love if you'd share the podcast with your friends, family, or coworkers to help get the word out. Thanks again for being a loyal listener of the podcast. We'll see you next week.